Killer Clown Encounter, 2016. When I was 15, I was walking home from a long, boring day at school. My school got off at 3:30. I was a freshman at the time. It was a Friday, and I was walking through a shortcut in the woods to my friend's house, and I remember hearing a strange run through the woods. I turned around, and there it was, a full-on clown painted face and costume holding a small kitchen knife came flying at me. I grabbed their wrist and twisted as hard as I could. They let out a big scream, and then I pushed it in a tree and started to run. I heard it get up from the leaves, which made a crunching sound, and it started running. I kept hearing it scream, "I'm going to kill you." I got out the woods and went to my friend's house. We called the cops, and they found the person. Turns out it was a 27-year-old female that escaped a mental institution. I'm from the UK, if that's any context. So way back in 2016, when the whole killer clown epidemic was huge, I was walking through the woods at around 10 p.m. alone in order to get to a party/gathering that was happening in a secluded part of the forest. It was almost pitch black, and I could barely see in front of me besides the flash on my phone, and everything seemed normal as I was walking to the party. I got to a long stretch of woods with no defined path, but it was the quickest way to the party, so I took it. As I got around midway through, I heard something to my left. I turned and saw a shadowy figure sat on a fallen log. I was understandably unnerved, but I couldn't make out if it was just shadows from the moonlight or if it was an actual person. I made the mistake of shining my phone light directly at it, and I was instantly terrified. Sat there. Alone in the middle of the woods was a largish man dressed as a clown with full face paint and sporting the creepiest smile imaginable. I tried to call 5 different people as I was passing him, and then I heard him get up behind me. I instantly started sprinting towards the end of the long stretch onto a path, which had a barbed wire fence down the side of it. During the sprint, I was pretending to be on the phone with one of my friends, and I could hear him running after me, but there was no chance in hell that I would be turning around to see if I was right. When I got to the path, I jumped over the fence as fast as I could and sliced my hands open as I did so. I then turned around and kept running backwards as I saw the clown, stood behind the fence just staring at me and smiling. I didn't stop running until I got to the party, and I was scared for a very long time after this. You have to bear in mind that there were so many rumors of people being killed by people dressed as clowns at the time, and while I will never know if the man had evil intentions or was just trying to scare me, it was extremely strange and scary to live through. So in conclusion, killer clown man from the woods, let's not meet. I don't know if many of you remember this, but back in 2016 there was a creepy clown trend where people dressed as creepy/killer clowns would hang out in places after dark or stalk people. My story takes place on my college campus during fall of that year. I lived with my grandparents before leaving for school, and I am extremely close to them. Also, I am very shy and had 0 friends or people I regularly hung out with at school. I wanted to reach out and meet new folks, so I signed up for a salsa dancing club that met on Friday nights. I told my grandma over the phone, and she was happy I was putting myself out there. She asked if I was going with anybody. No, I told her. I'm just gonna go by myself. Are you sure? She asked. Don't any of your roommates want to go? The idea of talking to my roommates terrified me. I could handle structured gatherings, but personal conversations left more room for my awkwardness to creep in. No, they're not here. I don't want you walking around campus by yourself at night. I thought my grandma was just being overprotective. Grandma, it's fine. The streets are well lit, and it's only a 10-minute walk. It's perfectly safe. Well, if you're not going with anybody, call me and let me talk to you on the phone as you walk back. I agreed. That evening was incredibly fun, learning the basic steps and dancing to upbeat Latin tunes. At around 10:30, I felt ready to head back to my dorm, so I snuck out of the building and headed toward my dorm. Although the paved path I was walking on was lit by streetlights, it seemed darker than usual. In addition, the entire campus was deserted. Normally, there were quite a few kids my age wandering around, but that night there was not a soul to be seen. I dialed my grandma and made small talk with her as I walked. I took my heels off and carried them in my free hand. Now, the path I was walking on went past a stretch of sidewalk that was perpendicular to the one I was taking. Under one of the streetlights, about 10 meters away, I noticed a lone figure standing with its back toward me. The figure, hearing me chatting on the phone, slowly turned toward me. He was tall and heavy-set, with wild red hair, and appeared to be wearing light blue pajamas. His face was obscured by a killer clown mask. The mask was stark white with dark black eye sockets and a twisted, malicious grin. Time seemed to suddenly slow way down. The clown did not move toward me. He simply stood there, staring. I knew I had to think fast. I contemplated my options. I could A. Scream like a little girl and run B. Approach him and confront him, or C.
Pretend he didn't scare me.
The entire moment I just described couldn't have lasted more than a second, but in the moment it felt like an eternity. Are you there? I heard my grandma say, remembering to breathe. With the phone still at my ear, I decided to go with plan C. I broke eye contact with the clown. So, anyway, I said loudly enough that the clown would hear me. Yeah, I'm on my way. I continued. Lopsided underscore squid. What's going on? Is everything okay? I heard my grandma ask, her voice suddenly filled with anxiety. As confidently and nonchalantly as I could, I walked past the sidewalk where the clown was standing, continuing to chat. His head slowly turned as I walked past, watching me until I was out of sight. I ducked into the archway of the nearest building and tried the door, praying it was unlocked. It was. Once I was inside, I slumped against one of the concrete walls and broke down in tears. I explained to my grandma what had just happened. My grandma yelled for my grandpa to dial the campus police on his cell phone so that I could stay on the line with her. I got up and started pacing up and down the empty halls, checking every door and window to see if the psycho clown had followed me. Was he just a stupid kid doing this on a dare? Or was he someone with more evil intentions? Some of the creepy clowns in the news had axes or baseball bats. I had no idea if mine was armed. When my grandpa tried to explain to the officer on the phone what happened and that I needed help, he told my grandpa, "Your granddaughter needs to make the call herself." Apparently the reason I had to talk to them was so that they could be sure the call wasn't just a prank or some stupid reason like that. The point is that they wouldn't take my grandparents' word that I was in distress. I would have to hang up with my grandma and dial the campus police myself. Not knowing if I would survive the night, I told my grandma between sobs, "I love you. I love you too."
My grandma was also crying.
I dialed campus police and told them who I was and what had happened. The officer on the phone sent several other officers to find me while I stayed on the phone with him and gave him a description of the clown. As I was talking, I heard a door open. I froze. Was the clown here? Did he find a way in? A tidal wave of relief washed over me as several officers came striding down the corridor. They walked with me back to my dorm. As soon as I was inside, I locked my door and window, and I shut the blinds. I called my grandma back to tell her I was safe. After talking for a little while longer, we said goodnight. Since then, I've made a few friends at school. While I'm in a better place now, I don't go out alone after dark anymore. And as for that creepy clown, let's not meet again. Before anything, a little backstory. I was 10 at the time and was visiting my hometown, Ecuador, for the summer. At the time, I knew just about everyone in my small little town, Alausi, and so did my parents, which is why they let me go on my own that day. Anyways, here's my encounter. Back when I was 10 years old, my family decided to take a visit to my hometown of Ecuador. We went for the summer and planned out just about our whole stay. One day, my mom and dad were getting ready to go to a wedding, and I was in the house with them. My big sister went over to a friend's house, and my other relatives had already left for the wedding. I was supposed to stay at home, alone for the duration, but I saw that it was a beautiful day out and decided to ask my mom and dad to go to a park that was no more than 2 blocks away. They were reluctant at first, stating that there would be nobody to take care of me, but I argued that it was a beautiful day out, and there was no way that the park would be empty. They kept getting dressed as I kept on arguing until they finally gave in. They said that I can go to the park as long as I was back before dark. I agreed and ran outside to head for the park. It took me no more than 10 minutes to get there, and I was ready to make new friends and play around. But oddly enough, there was nobody else in the park. It looked abandoned, which was weird seeing how this was one of 2 parks in the whole city. It should have been packed, but I paid no mind to it. I believe I ran over to a swing set or slide. It was 12 years ago, I can't remember, and played around. As I played, I suddenly heard a voice from the distance. A clown was on the other side of a gate and motioning for me to get closer. Behind him was a white van which I had noticed before, but just thought it was a delivery truck of sorts. I slowly started walking towards the clown and stopped a good distance away from him. He asked me in Spanish, "Hey kid, do you like clowns?" I nodded no to him, and he gave me that clown frown and then said, "Well then let me see if I can change that." He opened up his car, and by looking inside I saw there was only 2 boxes, though I wasn't sure what they were filled with, and that was it. No seats, no posters, just those 2 boxes, and then complete emptiness. Being a child, I still paid no mind to it, and watched as he pulled out a deflated balloon. He wrapped his lips around the end and blew till the balloon was fully inflated. He tied the end and started to form the balloon into a balloon animal of a dog. He showed it to me, and I smiled. He then motioned me to come closer, to which I complied. He handed the balloon to me and said, "Do you like?" I nodded yes this time and gave him a little smile. He then grinned in the creepiest way possible. The grin was so creepy that even as a kid I knew to back away a bit. The clown then said that if I wanted to see the rest of his tricks, I would have to get into the truck. I told him that the exit was on the other side of the park, and I wouldn't be able to climb the small gate. He then said the few words that haunt me to this day. "Get a little closer, and I'll carry you over. Then we can have loads of fun in my truck. Come on, kid." While saying this, he still had that creepy grin plastered across his face. I merely backed away and told him, "No, it's okay, sir." His grin turned into anger, as though he was annoyed at this. He placed his hands on his hips and said to me, but we were going to have so much fun." Right when he said that, I heard a voice on the other side of the park yelling, "Son,
So,
I'm here to pick you up." I turned and saw a man that I recognized as a local neighbor. He was not my real father, obviously, but the little me knew to run over to him. I said nothing to the clown, I just ran to man and gave him a hug. The man waved to the clown and said, "Thanks for keeping my kid entertained." To which the clown replied, "No problem." As we turned around, I was able to hear this man murmur, "Sick fuck." I looked at him and asked, "Sir, what exactly is going on?" He gave a sigh and explained everything. As it turns out, that was no real clown. He was a man that had been kidnapping kids across all of Ecuador. He would lure kids with the clown costume and take them away to God knows what place. The people of my town had a feeling he was coming to our town, which was why the whole park was deserted. He said that he was walking by when he noticed that I was talking to the clown and ran over to basically save me. As he told me this, he also dialed for the police to report the incident. We had finally arrived at my house, and this man said, "Be careful with who you talk to, son. Not everyone is who they seem." I gave him one final hug and gave him a thanks for saving me from that sick fuck. He gave me a rub on the head and said, "It's okay, my boy, now hurry on and I have my own things to worry about." I nodded and ran in the house. Nobody was there, and by the time they had returned, I had decided not to tell anyone since I knew they'd flip the fuck out. It took a while to forget about the whole incident, especially with those words that kept reminding me of him, but I soon forgot till I came across this page, and memories of that clown flooded my head. I'm not quite sure what happened to the sicko, but hopefully he is now behind bars, hopefully. So to that creepy clown from long ago, let's not meet. Well, I'm going to start by saying that English, it's not my first language, so you will find lots of grammatical mistakes, and I'm sorry for that. Smiley face. So all started when I was 9 or 10 at the time. My parents were divorced since I was 3 years old, so my mom was never home because she was working as a nurse almost all day. She just came back home to eat dinner with us and sleep. So I have a bigger sister. She was 15 at that time. She is 5 years older than me, so she was not so interested in what a 10-old-year was doing. She had her own teenager problems, so I had 2 friends at that time, a girl called Daniela and a boy called Eduardo. We was always hanging out playing with Barbies, even Eduardo too, cause yeah, he was gay, but we didn't knew at that time. Every day after school, we was there playing in the backyard, and at 2 houses of Daniela's house was living a family, the mom, dad, and the son. He was our age, maybe 8 or 9, and he was always watching us play from his window because his dad never let him out in the neighborhood. Everybody knew each other. Often this neighbor was passing by like, "Hey, what's up, kids, take some candy," because he was a clown everybody knew in the neighborhood. So it was kind of normal to see him and say hi. One time he passed and said, "Hey, I have some toys and candy in my house. Do you want to come?" My friend Eduardo say, "Sorry, sir, I can't. My mom doesn't allow me to go," and he left, and I had a bad feeling about it. And I respond, "Sorry, sir, my mom is going to come back soon." And I came back at my house while Daniela say, "Okay, I want some candy I didn't thought anything wrong about cause I was a child." After a couple of weeks that continue happening. So one time I came back to school and went directly to Daniela's house. She wasn't there, which was weird to me, so I went to my creepy neighbor's house. And I noticed the front door open, so I push a bit, and I see Daniela with her skirt down and this creepy bastard staring at her. So I asked Daniela, "What are you doing? Let's go." So she looked at me, and I run to my house thinking of what I just saw. As I said, my mom was never home, so I told to another neighbor, and she told to Daniela's grandmother, and at the end of the day, everybody knew about it. He denied all, obviously saying I saw wrong, and was all in my imagination. Daniela never said a word about, and we stopped taking after that. She moved to another country, and I stay living at the same place, watching how this creepy bastard was making parties for kids in his clown costume around children like nothing ever happened. After, when I was 18, I start to work, so I was obliged to pass around his house every day, and the worst part that he was leaving to go to work at the same time. So he was always waving at me saying, "Hi neighbor, good morning," and I was like, "Good morning," and continue walking. One day I was so late for work I was going to take a cab when I see a car next to me and say, "I can give you a ride if you want," and it was so late that I didn't know about it too much, and I said okay. I went in the front seat next to him, and at first was really awkward after he started to ask me about my work and whatever. I answered him, and I say, "Okay," and the next stop I go, "Thanks for the raid," and he was, "You're welcome, and before I go, can I ask you something?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And then he asked, "Have you even seen Daniela again? Because, you ruined all the fun for me." I froze. My heart stopped beating, and he closed the door of the car and say, "Have a good day at work," with the creepiest smile I have ever seen in my life. A couple of months later, I got my own apartment and moved, and I have not seen him since then. So, old creep neighbor, let's not meet. Well, I'm going to start by saying that English, it's not my first language, so you will find lots of grammatical mistakes, and I'm sorry for that. Smiley face. So all started when I was 9 or 10 at the time. My parents were divorced since I was 3 years old, so my mom was never home because she was working as a nurse almost all day. She just came back home to eat dinner with us and sleep. So I have a bigger sister. She was 15 at that time. She is 5 years older than me, so she was not so interested in what a 10-old-year was doing. She had her own teenager problems, so I had 2 friends at that time, a girl called Daniela and a boy called Eduardo. We was always hanging out playing with Barbies, even Eduardo too, cause yeah, he was gay, but we didn't knew at that time. Every day after school, we was there playing in the backyard, and at 2 houses of Daniela's house was living a family, the mom, dad, and the son. He was our age, maybe 8 or 9, and he was always watching us play from his window because his dad never let him out in the neighborhood. Everybody knew each other. Often this neighbor was passing by like, "Hey, what's up kids, take some candy," because he was a clown everybody knew in the neighborhood. So it was kind of normal to see him and say hi. One time he passed and said, "Hey, I have some toys and candy in my house, do you want to come?" My friend Eduardo say, "Sorry, sir, I can't. My mom doesn't allow me to go," and he left, and I had a bad feeling about it. And I respond, "Sorry, sir, my mom is going to come back soon," and I came back at my house while Daniela say, "Okay, I want some candy I didn't thought anything wrong about cause I was a child." After a couple of weeks that continue happening. So one time I came back to school and went directly to Daniela's house. She wasn't there, which was weird to me, so I went to my creepy neighbor's house. And I noticed the front door open, so I push a bit, and I see Daniela with her skirt down and this creepy bastard staring at her. So I asked Daniela, "What are you doing? Let's go." So she looked at me, and I run to my house thinking of what I just saw. As I said, my mom was never home, so I told to another neighbor, and she told to Daniela's grandmother, and at the end of the day, everybody knew about it. He denied all, obviously saying I saw wrong, and was all in my imagination. Daniela never said a word about, and we stopped taking after that. She moved to another country, and I stay living at the same place, watching how this creepy bastard was making parties for kids in his clown costume around children like nothing ever happened. After, when I was 18, I start to work, so I was obliged to pass around his house every day, and the worst part that he was leaving to go to work at the same time. So he was always waving at me saying, "Hi neighbor, good morning," and I was like, "Good morning," and continue walking. One day I was so late for work I was going to take a cab when I see a car next to me and say, "I can give you a ride if you want," and it was so late that I didn't know about it too much, and I said okay. I went in the front seat next to him, and at first was really awkward after he started to ask me about my work and whatever. I answered him, and I say, "Okay," and the next stop I go, "Thanks for the raid," and he was, "You're welcome, and before I go, can I ask you something?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And then he asked, "Have you even seen Daniela again? Because, you ruined all the fun for me." I froze. My heart stopped beating, and he closed the door of the car and say, "Have a good day at work," with the creepiest smile I have ever seen in my life. A couple of months later, I got my own apartment and moved, and I have not seen him since then. So, old creep neighbor, let's not meet. Hello, Ellum. I am a long-time lurker and decided to put up one of my own. About 6 years ago, when I was 15, I used to walk home every day from school about 2 miles to my house. I stayed away from Main Street due to the lack of a sidewalk, and instead just went straight through my decent-sized neighborhood. It wasn't the safest place, but I knew basic self-defense and was always aware of my surroundings. This particular day, I happened to be passed by a very slow-rolling maroon Buick. The driver was one single black male. I thought nothing of it, other than the speed. I was still 1.5 miles to my house till I picked up the pace. A few minutes later rolls by the same Buick with 2 more black males than before. My stomach instantly dropped. I know a weird situation when I see one, and once I see them staring, I pull out my phone and pretend to converse with someone and look straight ahead, shoulders high, and as much confidence as I could display for a 4 feet 10 inches 100-pound girl. They drive on, and a few minutes later again they're slow rolling by, and literally there is 2 more men in the car now, and they're slowing down at a rate I believe they are about to stop beside me. I take no chances and bolt for a house with the front door open, glass outer door, and bang on it wildly. They speed off, and I try to catch the license plate, but to no avail. An older woman answers the door and is understanding, asks me what I saw, and if I want to come inside. I said no. She is safety right now, but could still be a creep. Offers me the phone and tells me to phone the police first, parent second, but I share that my father is the police and he'll know the right people to contact directly. Plus he'll come get me the hell out of there. He arrives the same time his on-duty fellow officer does, and they ask me all the questions: who, what, why, where, and ask the lady if she saw anything, but she said no. So we head home, and from then on Dad makes me stick to the main road or ride home with a friend, call as soon as leaving school, etc. I believe they found the creeps a few blocks over, but not much they could do besides tell them to stand down and let it be known they messed with the wrong officer's daughter, and they're being watched. So maroon Buick, containing way too many gentlemen. Let's not meet. After spending the better part of my weekend reading the stories in this fantastic subreddit, I felt obliged to share a story. This is not my story, but it happened to my friend in the summer of 2010. My friend, we will call her Emily, was running in a park about 1 mile from her house. Now, during the day, this park is the safest place in the world. Located next to a fairly busy street, with the houses surrounding it, and with a tennis court and baseball field, this park was always filled with people. Since Emily had work that day, she decided to run around dusk, when the park was fairly empty. Although this park is literally located in a neighborhood, it is downright creepy around this time, and cops can usually be seen patrolling the area looking for drug dealers or horny teens. The trail she was running on is kind of hidden in the surrounding patch of forest and dips behind this little hill to where the baseball field is located. As she was approaching the baseball field, she noticed a man sitting on the bench. Figuring it was just someone taking a break from a walk or something, she didn't really think anything of it. But as she approached him is when things got weird. The guy was sitting there wearing a clown mask. She said it looked like Pennywise from it. This obviously struck her as creepy, so she sped up from a jog to a run. A quick look over her shoulder, and she saw the guy had stood up and was starting to run after her. This obviously freaked the fuck out of Emily, so she just dead-on sprinted back to her house. As Emily approached her house, her other friend Stacy had just pulled into the driveway. Emily screamed at Stacy to run in the house and call the cops. By this time, the clown creeper had lost interest and was nowhere to be seen. The cops came, looked for the guy, and a report was filed. Nothing ever came from it. Emily was obviously scared out of her mind and refused to walk alone at night, and flat out avoided the park for a couple of years. Now, among our friends group, we had a kind of general consensus on who it was that chased Emily. We all figured it was this kid we knew from high school who lived less than a block away from the park. We will call him Jim. Now, Jim was always kind of strange, was really into insane clown posse, and was just a generally creepy, albeit harmless, individual. He could have been just reflecting upon the vast, majestic, sonically sexual music that is ICP, and wearing that mask was his getaway. But most likely his intentions were a little more sinister. On a side note, a couple weeks later, I was driving home from a friend's house. The way I take home passes Jim's house. There is also a stop sign that causes you to literally stop in front of his house. The windows were down because it was a hot night, and I slowly creeped to a stop at the stop sign. As I stopped, I looked out the passenger side window towards Jim's house. And lo and behold, sitting no farther than 5 feet from my car is Jim. Looking fucked up. I mean, strung out hard on something. He looked up to me with this hazy, lost look on his face, and his mouth broke into this really strange grin. Needless to say, I hauled ass home and didn't sleep too well that. Haven't seen or heard much about Jim since then, although I'm pretty sure he still lives in the same house.